Okay, I'll talk about the Illuminati, but you might feel a little bamboozled because it's not exactly going to be what it sounds like, but I promise it's going to be interesting to say the least, right? Anyway, let's talk about the Illuminati. What is the Illuminati? What is the Illuminati? And what is this triangle with an eye? It's always an eye. And it's like the theme, the conspiratorial significance of the eye is very clear. But why? Why is there such a conspiratorial significance of the eye? Why did the Freemasons and whatever secret societies, why was the Eye of Providence such an important symbol for them? And what is the Illuminati actually? It's hard to explain the inexplicable. And it's hard to recall a dream that you just woke up from. Even attempting to remember that dream deepens your forgetting of it. Translating a dream is just impossible. Translating it into consciousness. At best, you can remember the same feelings you had during that dream, which will draw to memory some of the imagery and experiences you had in it. But it's always the feeling, it's always the intuition that allows you to reconnect with your dreams, not any conscious interpretation. There's something Marx said that I always found intriguing. What separates a man from an animal? What separates a man from the best of bees, what separates an architect from the best of bees, he says, is that before realizing his work, the architect raises it into the imagination. And it's the mediation by the imagination. And I suppose, if we're going to interpret that generously or uncharitably, depending on how you look at it, we would also say that means mediation by consciousness, just something that animals don't have. Animals, although they do things, do not do things in ways that are mediated with conscious intention, with something imagined in their mind before the fact. But I always found this description by Marx a little bizarre and confusing, given Marx's materialist orientation. How can it be that the essentiality of humanity is defined by the faculty of consciousness? This is something that actually, I think, contradicts Marx's humanism more generally. Because the humanism according to which man can be distinguished from other animals on the basis of thought, consciousness, their mind, so on and so forth, that is the humanism of the young Hegelians, of Hegel himself maybe, and of Feuerbach, which Marx actually explicitly distinguishes himself from by arriving at a notion of humanity defined by the species being, right? Species being has nothing to do with like a zoological species. Species rather refers to a kind of classification within logic of a particular being, a being that which attends to the reproduction of its own particular existence, and for whom its own particular existence is the object of its being, right? So this is what species being means. So this is a description of the essentiality of man in contradiction to animals, in contradiction to inanimate, intelligible things, that is not actually based on the faculty of thought or the mind or consciousness, but something more fundamental, right? The species being. So I've always found it rather peculiar that Marx understands the essentiality of human labor in the way that he described it. I also think it's strange because it's probably not true, depending on how we interpret it, according to our basic experience. Workers, especially in the modern era, engaging in monotonous and repetitive work day in and day out, do not do so with a whole lot of thought, actually. When work becomes so repetitive, it almost becomes thoughtless, actually. You just kind of do it over and over again, and you become so used to it that it actually comes naturally to you in a way. No longer is it mediated by consciousness or perhaps the imagination. You just do it. You're just doing it, almost spontaneously and intuitively. It becomes a reflex. You can't imagine that factory workers working 12 hours a day, doing incredibly monotonous, repetitive patterns of hand motion and labor, are at every instance of activity raising the object of labor in their imagination and thinking through it. Maybe that's true for the more skilled laborer, blue-collar work that exists today, but it's definitely not true for the industrial factory worker in the Victorian era, which is the time period in which Marx was writing. Labor is something very repetitive, something that most people would say is thoughtless, actually. Ayn Rand, famous Marxist, Ayn Rand, is the best example of the sentiment and the kind of outlook according to which, the workers are just tools. They're just drones, thoughtlessly droning on. But the visionary, the person behind the ideas, is actually the one responsible for the thing being made in the way it is. Any idiot can take a hammer and smash it, repetitively. But the guy with the vision, the artist, the engineer, that's the brilliant person who builds the world. This is Ayn Rand's view. It's also the view of our friend John Zerka, who always, the very first time I talked to him, would always reproach me with the following question: who matters more, the architect or the worker? And he always says it's the architect. Obviously, the worker is someone who thoughtlessly and repetitively just does things that any idiot can do. He doesn't have the creativity and the imagination and the consciousness. To be fair to Marx regards human labor holistically, and that's why he refers to the division of labor between mental and physical labor. Both are part of a totality of labor, of the way mankind relates to the natural world. But why is it that the physical and menial kind of labor is what's actually essential and fundamental, rather than, let's say, the creative or mental kind, the mental component, that is? And I think that's something worth talking about and addressing. Why is that? When a worker engages monotonously in a repetitive form of labor, what he's doing, maybe from the perspective of someone looking outside in, is internalizing on a intuitive level to the point where it's natural and it's a natural reflex for him, someone else's idea. So an idea before, which struck a person's mind like lightning, a conscious idea they had to focus on and be alert and awake and crafting and creating, suddenly becomes actual and material when a worker can mindlessly reproduce it without having to think about it whatsoever, when it becomes integrated in the material existence of mankind. The scary thing about human beings, I'm not saying I agree with that, I'm just saying, just to work from a context of a commonplace view. The scary things about human beings is that we don't have natural reflexes. And the terrifying thing about human beings is that natural reflexes can be created within us artificially. The most horrific example of this, of course, is childhood trauma. When someone is abused at a young age as a child, something has actually occurred, an actual trauma. They call it trauma. Trauma, in the real sense of the word, it refers to like a physical kind of alteration, or let's say you're like putting a dent in something, right? But things like this are actually psychologically traumatic, and they change your intuitive experience. They change your deepest, most sensibility. They change the deepest source of your motivations and your aspirations and your desires and your dreams, whatever you want. They fundamentally change something about you at the most fundamental level. Your reflexes change. If you're a veteran of a war and you have PTSD, loud noises affect your reflexes in ways they didn't before because your experience is such that you associate it with danger and fear for your life. And I can go on naming these countless kinds of different examples. The terrifying thing about humanity is that our nature can change. It's plastic. In contrast to a wolf whose reflexes might be able to change, but can only change to the detriment of their existence as a species one way or another. For example, this is the cause probably of speciation itself. Geotraumatic events in its surrounding environment can induce changes in a given organism, which over time probably will lead to a different species. This is the Lysenkoist view, or the so-called neo-Lamarckist view, which, as epigenetics, the field of epigenetics shows us, is actually a increasingly promising description of how the natural world actually works. But in any case, the human species remains human in spite of these traumas imposed upon the human being. Industrial capitalism in England was also a trauma. I mean, traumas are not always necessarily bad. Being potty trained is a kind of trauma, such that it becomes intuitive and natural for you not to wet your bed or shit your pants while you're sleeping. Walking is a trauma in a way. It's natural for you to walk, but you have to learn how. It's not just a distinction between nature and nurture, which is the point. We have to learn the things that come naturally to us. In order to develop an alcohol addiction, we have to taste alcohol, which tastes pretty bad to our senses, but once we do it enough times, the taste becomes numb to us, and then before you know it, we're addicted. It's an acquired taste, if you will. Every single thing about a skill you can learn, everything about what is becoming of a human experience and a human life is based on acquired natures, acquired tastes. Nothing is given to you from the outset. The only thing given to you from the outset when you're brought into this world are the tears, the whining and the crying, pure suffering. That's it. Nothing, no language is given to you. No ability for the world to be intelligible is given to you. All of these things are learned. All of them. Now, you can imagine and maybe speculate the kinds of troubles the first human beings probably were having to go through. Though I suspect many of their behaviors likely were inherited from the animal kingdom from which they descended, if you believe that. But after hundreds of thousands of years of civilization, after hundreds of thousands of years of the development of history, and finally, after the era of modernity, where mankind no longer seamlessly, as though walking through a dream, experiences the world in a uninterrupted, seamless way. I know I'm repeating myself. We have the age of enlightenment, where we wake up, we open our eyes, we wake from the dream world, and then we're left with trying to recall the dream we just had. And that's modern science, ladies and gentlemen. Relating to the natural world. Before we stumble around reacting to traumas inflicted upon us and finding harmony somehow at the end of the tunnel and acquiring an existence. This is each and every era of history before the modern age. A flood comes from the river and wipes out an entire civilization, and you build from scratch, and suddenly the flood enters your myths and your legends and becomes part of your harmonious and holistic cosmos, but you still have the privilege of walking through the world blind and blissfully, not wakefully. Life is like a dream for the ancients. It's really not that deep. And they're going with the flow in a way similar to a dream, actually. They're not really remembering or recalling their experiences all that often. You think in ancient Egypt, they were recalling and recording their experiences as often as we are today? You think every minute detail of people's lives and the routines of those lives was being directly recorded all the time? It couldn't be. They didn't even have the technology to communicate that. They didn't have smartphones to record every time they went into the shower or took a dump or every time a fly came on them. If you notice something interesting about the ancient world or even the medieval world is how much it seemed like they were bullshitting about everything. You know, you'll see a medieval story, real story, trying to recall facts about a knight who went into the forest and encountered a grizzly bear. And then they'll draw the grizzly bear, not as a grizzly bear, but as this monstrous beast that has wings, that has 10 tails, that has 3 heads, that has a bunch of fangs, that has, you know, it's literally like the most out of this world alien looking thing ever. And you're like, why did they draw a bear that way? That's not what a bear looks like. Why was the way in which they recorded encounters with beasts and even battles why was it so embellished and bullshit, right? But I think you missed the point. They weren't recalling these events in the first place in any exact or detailed way. They were vaguely recalling a trauma. Imagine if you woke up for a dream and you tried to recall your dream. Is it going to be accurate? Hell no. And it's the same thing for the waking world before the modern age. Nobody was actually recording their experiences with any real degree of precision because people thought that was a ridiculous vanity. Our experiences will be recorded with true precision on the day of judgment. When God, weighs us, our sins and our deeds and everything, and that's God's business. Well, who am I to actually, I'm going to draw the bear accurately? Is it not enough for me to evoke the feeling of terror and fear and anxiety that I had? It may as well look like that alien monster because that's just what I felt like. I'm just vaguely recording that I encountered a monster. The details don't matter. The fact that I have to record it in the first place means it was probably a significant impact and interruption in my day. And this is another mistake I think modern thinkers make about pre-modern history and the recording of history. People didn't by default want to record or recall or be consciously aware of their experiences for its own sake. If you have to be consciously aware of your experiences and recall them, that implies an interruption in the seamless continuity of your experience, which is a trauma. If I'm recording this huge battle that happens, it's because I was walking about my day whistling and I had, a string of wheat in my mouth, and and then all of a sudden, this huge battle happens, which interrupts my day, and I'm, and it traumatized me, so now I have to record it and remember it. See, I'm obviously being hyperbolic, but you get the idea. It's like history is recorded when things cannot go the way they used to go. And I have to record this because this was a significant interruption in my day. If Haas is living his day, let's say I'm a retired man, I just, just going through the motions, walking on the beach every day and living a normal day, day in, day out, whatever, sun rising, sun falling, waking up, going to sleep. And then I'm walking on the beach and like a man comes up to me and like throws a bucket of shit in my face and punches me in the face, and then like for good measure brings out his phone and is like, "It was just a prank, bro!" That's a significant interruption in my day. It's probably something I am going to remember. It's probably something I am going to probably tell people about and record, right? I didn't want to have to do that. I would prefer to just go about my day and not have to remember a damn thing. So you get what I'm talking about here, more or less, about trauma and memory and wakefulness. Consciousness, what we call consciousness. Conscious activity is really an exception in human history, not the norm. This is a humiliating insight for enlightened Europe. Because after the age of enlightenment, we want to be conscious and awake and enlightened permanently, in a permanent state. And if you think about it, industrial capitalism is the ultimate kind of atrocity and scandal for such a perspective. Oppose the lofty aspirations of enlightenment and permanent state of consciousness, and always we will never go back to the ignorance of the past. Compare that to the monotonous, thoughtless work of the laborer, just repeat like a zombie over and over again, not even thinking about it. It's these kind of two extremes, really, two severe extremes coexisting. One is it being a tremendous scandal for enlightened society. Proletariat has always been a scandal for the bourgeois society. Fast forward in our enlightened, civilized society, even today with our advanced technology and industry and you name it, the waking world, the world of alertness and consciousness and focus, the results speak for themselves. But simultaneously, the average person walks through this world, walks through this life with their eyes wide shut, as though it's a dream. Somehow, the ultimate achievement of wakefulness, of consciousness, of enlightenment exists side by side with the most brain-dead, seamless, intuitive, natural life people live. Oh, I go to school, I get on PS5, I play my video games are one of the best examples of this. I play my video games, I go to the club, I don't really think about all that much. I'm not trying to crucify people for that. It's natural for a human being to live most of their life naturally. But we reckon with the fact that it's not given by nature. We live natural lives that come naturally to us, where we don't even have to, we don't have to think that much, and it comes naturally to us. It's like a reflex. Yeah, when I go to 7-Eleven, grab myself, a Powerade and reach for my wallet, pay for. I don't even have to think. I just like do it automatically, right? But none of that stuff is naturally given. It's not naturally given. Artificially, we have fallen into a nature which is not there just by virtue of nature itself. There's at some point some abrupt discontinuity in a natural, normal experience that is implied by society, especially modern society, where it's so not as a kind of collective trauma we are just kind of trying to recover from, but one we are deliberately trying to impose. I mean, the best example of this probably is how most people see the transgender stuff or whatever. It's like they're artificially trying to traumatize us, impose traumas upon our children. This is a hyperbolic, extreme example. I'm not trying to make a comment on transgenders. I'm trying to illustrate the kind of epitome. It's the same thing with science, though. Like, scientists are also trying to traumatize us, fundamentally alter how we experience life, naturally, mind you, with some new kind of invention or discovery. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But I'm just trying to say we experience life naturally, but in reality, we cannot help but confront that at least in some capacity, we are being controlled. There is a conscious intention behind it. There's a conscious purpose behind it of somebody who was not sleepwalking, right? Somebody who was awake, consciously designing this. And that, my friends, is the eye of the Illuminati. And that is why conspiracism is so intuitive and so natural and so authentic and immediate to someone who acquires for the first time some kind of political consciousness at odds with the hegemony. When you first break with what you're being fed on CNN, when you start rubbing your eyes like, I don't believe what I see on the news anymore, that's BS. Then the first thing you experience is that it's a conspiracy. I've been sleeping this whole time, and there's somebody with their eyes open who's behind all this. And This is why conspiracism is the most spontaneous form of dissonant consciousness there is. Because you realize I've been going through the motions naturally, but this shit ain't natural. That's a profound realization. And this is why books like 1984 resonate with people so much. It's like, oh my God, we live in this totalitarian artificial society that's meant to keep us asleep and unaware of how much we're being manipulated and controlled. And it's really the trauma of waking up that conspiracy theories give form to and respond to and react to. Just like how in the Middle Ages, when a guy who goes in the woods and gets attacked by a bear, and he recalls it in all these crazy, wacky ways because he's responding to a trauma, conspiracy theories have the quality and character they do, because when someone wakes up from modern society and realizes how much of it is artificial and controlled, they also respond to that trauma, because it is a traumatic realization how unnatural society is in comparison to how naturally we experience it. That's a trauma. That's a traumatic experience. And it's recalled with the same degree of faithfulness as the guy in the Middle Ages recalls his encounter with the bear. This, my friends, is where I'm going to have to wrap it up, just when it's getting good. But I'll wrap it up in a way that I hope you find satisfying. Wakefulness and dreams have a dialectical relationship, and one cannot exist without the other. If we return back to the original question of why the worker and not the architect, it's simple, because there's no reason to think, actually, that the architect precedes the worker. There's no reason to think that the worker's activity, as intuitive, natural activity of labor, of humanity, is something that comes after consciousness. On the contrary, consciousness comes after and reacts to it. The seamlessness of humanity's being, the materiality of humanity's being is what comes first, whether it's inherited from the animal kingdom or whether it's inherited from the most arbitrary lightning strike that hit men and women at the outset of their existence. It doesn't matter. Because in any case, dreams come before wakefulness. We sleep before we are awake. When we're awake, we are responding to the trauma of having awakened. And it's likewise the case for the architect. Before human beings are imagining a building, they are building something. How do I know this? Because animals can build. Animals can survive. That comes first. Not ideas. So the problem with conspiracism, I guess, is when it veers into the territory of paranoia. And it only veers into the territory of paranoia when it cannot be reconciled with the reality and the fact that dreaming is a fundamental part of human existence. I don't just mean dreaming when you're sleeping at night. I mean the way in which we intuitively experience reality seamlessly without necessarily being consciously aware of it all the time. That doesn't necessarily mean that ignorance is being imposed on you, or in the case of Immanuel Kant's paranoia, that you're engaged in a perpetual self-imposed ignorance. That's just a cope. When Immanuel Kant wakes up in the morning and has a cup of coffee and gets into his slippers, is that self-imposed ignorance? Because if he's not really consciously aware of everything the whole time? No, it's completely natural and normal. And Marx's humanism, recognizing the exceptionality of humanity, begins with the fact that even humanity in its dreamlike state, in its intuitive state of just kind of materially subsisting as it is on the basis of its being and not an idea of its being, that is real humanity. A human being doesn't need to be conscious to be human. I think that's really the point. As for the question of the deeper forces of wakefulness behind our reality, there is an accumulated tradition of the ruling class who have accumulated an occult tradition, an esoteric tradition, which for them is a source of power for them. It's a source of reproducing their existence. It's a source for them of learning the arts of maintaining the power that they have, which they have done so for centuries. Same ruling class families. And how deep the rabbit hole goes, I can't tell you. But here's what I can tell you. If you want to have a chance against them, if you want to beat the Illuminati, you have to create a form of organization which is awake in ways the Illuminati isn't. One that is awake to the reality of dreams itself. That, my friends, is the Communist Party. What wakefulness lies at the end of the continuity of our collective human experience is a question of eschatology. It always has been. It's always been understood that the day of judgment is our day of judgment. That is going to be the moment of consciousness when we wake up to what we were fully in the form of God's judgment. In the modern age, eschatology has become an operative material fact of civilization. There is an eschatology of the elite agenda, what they are planning society to be. There is an eschatology of Communist Party dictatorships who have 5-year plans defining the orientation and development of society. I mean, think about it. You're in the Soviet Union or you're in China. There's a 5-year plan. You're experiencing life in a rhythmic kind of, intuitive way. You're not really thinking all the time. You're just kind of going through the motion. But there is a plan guiding the development of society. Isn't there something beautiful and reassuring about that? That it's all, that yes, it's not naturally given, just as a given. It's not, the seamlessness of your experience does not mean that reality itself, that is the object of that experience as defined by something seamless. There is an agenda. There is a kind of plan. But it's a plan you have access to. You have access to not only to be educated on because it's transparent, but even to contribute to. By contrast, in the bourgeois society, there is a plan, an elite agenda. We have no way of having any input in it because when we wake up to that plan, they deny there is one and they call us crazy conspiracy theorists. Conspiracy theorists get it wrong because they don't realize we need our own conspiracy. We need our own eschatology defining the ultimate orientation and goal of reality. And that is the Communist Party. That is the conspiracy of the people. The open conspiracy of the people and of history. That is proletarian consciousness, if you will. Now, I hope you guys enjoyed my obscure, silly talk about the Illuminati.